diving right into it, with you guys being like new faces to Valiant and just taking a flagship character and moving in a fresh direction, what's this whole experience been like? Like what's the fan response been like? What are you excited for coming up with X-O in particular?
Oh man, I mean, coming in right off the bat for me to Valiant and them handing me literally like, hey, here's our biggest character, good luck, have fun, was exciting, but also terrifying, super, super, super terrifying, to be handed such a classic staple in this universe, especially after the huge success that was, Matt Kint's run and Venditti's run that we were following up. And, I really wanted to bring X-O into the modern superhero world in a way that we haven't really seen. We've seen a lot of more classic sci-fi, and that was scary. It's scary to take a classic character, beloved character like that, and not do a 180, but just just a little tectonic plate shift, if you will, with them. But I knew having the right team is 90% of it. The other 10% is just how it gets out there in the world. And Dennis was one of the first people I reached out to about it. I've always really loved his perspective on finding the humanity in superhumans. I think truly, I think you're one of the best in the industry at doing that, and finding the humanity in sentient alien battle armors too, which I'm sure is a fun challenge.
Yeah, that was the most fun part for me, because when Heather came to me, my first thought was, yeah, it's been such an amazing run. Like, X-O has been really solid since the 2011 relaunch. So 10 years of really solid, awesome stories. Like, how the hell are we going to make that new and exciting and fresh? And it was a fun challenge. Also, in the past, I've pitched like 3 Valiant things and they never go anywhere. So I just assumed I wasn't going to get the job, which I think was more freeing. Like, well, this never works out, so let's try it. But yeah, it was really fun to find that humanity. That's like what my brain does whenever I'm given a project, is to try to find the people. And the book has been so much about alien worlds and alien invasions and time traveling Visigoth warriors and all of this stuff that's kind of badass but hard to wrap your mind around. Like, I wanted to find the here and now of it and the character, and Heather was 100% on board, so it worked out.
Super cool. And this is actually the first time we've had both an editor and a writer on the show. It's really exciting I just really have to ask what that relationship is like and the dynamics of that working relationship and how it's influenced what we see in X-O today.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis, do you want to, what's it like working with an editor? I don't know.
I love it a lot. I think it depends on how you get along with the editor. Heather and I feel like we're on the same page from the very beginning. Like the keywords she dropped on me about what she was thinking when we first talked about it like 3 years ago now, were exactly the kind of thing I'm into. Like, she wanted to grow the world and make it human and make it more relatable and create this relationship between Shanhara and Arik. I can't do it. It's Eric to me, no matter what. But yeah, that, like, what she was asking for is exactly what I do. So I think we were really on the same page from the beginning. And I don't know, it's different working with different editors, but working with Heather, sort of like having a 2-person writer's room where we bounce everything back and forth. And I like that. Like, if I'm working on a creator-owned book or something where I don't have that, I make my friends listen to me ramble about things to figure stuff out. And it's really nice to have that partner in Heather. So for me, it's like having a co-writer, having a writer's room, have something else to bounce the ideas off of, to tell me when I'm going down the wrong path or when something's stupid, although she's really nice about it. And also to remind me that I'm 3 days late on whatever the thing is, because I'm always 3 days late.
Yeah, no, I think, every writer has a different philosophy and every editor has a different philosophy when it comes to these things. But I think, Dennis said it pretty accurately. And I don't I don't view the job as an editor as like the boss, even though technically in a way I am. I like to think of it more as like if comics were a sport, an editor's your team captain. You're on the field with the rest of the players, and it's up to you to really like, call the shots and be a leader. Open communication, I think, is a very huge part of that, and just being very straightforward about like what a company's needs are, what a character's needs are, what a story's needs are. Even if that means telling Dennis like, hey, that's a really dumb idea, you should probably come up with something better. But much nicer. I'm much nicer than that.
Very nice about it. Well, this project, I think, our relationship's been a little bit different because, for one thing, we started talking about this before the previous run had ended. Like, we had so much runway to figure things out and get it going, and then obviously with COVID, we had a major delay right as the release was supposed to happen. So there have been a lot of like, okay, where are things? What's happening? When is this going to launch? When can we announce it? And when is it going to come back? And so it's been really nice to have, like, you are very honest with me and very careful with my emotions as we went through the roller coaster that has been X-O.
I always say an editor's part-time therapist. So yeah.
I've only freaked out like 3 times.
Hey, Eric freaks out way more.
He's got bigger problems.
Well, speaking of those big problems, how's it been finding that balance? Because X-O is like one of the top guns as far as not just reputation, but just like power wise. He's almost feels like that like Thor, Superman kind of role. And then, to come in and, like you said, you want to humanize him, which the first issue and second, great jobs on that element of it. The basketball part, flattens the ball, too good. But anyway, carrying on. So, like, how fun is it? Been something that's been really fun for you to kind of find that good balance to where you don't want to like job him as far as because it's X-O Manowar, but at the same time, you're making this more relatable dude.
Yeah, for me, that's about like. You have to find the humanity and the flaws in the character without making them flaws that don't make sense, right? Like, he's going to win a fist fight. Like, he's going to destroy the tank and blow up the building and do whatever he has to do. It doesn't make sense for that to be where he fails, I guess is the best way to put it. But failure's human, so you got to find that, right? And I think that's where the Shanhara relationship has been really fun because she sees all of his blind spots. Like, he doesn't care about what's it called? That's a weird thing to draw a blank on. Rush hour traffic, for instance.
I thought that was going to be your reference, but I wasn't sure, so I didn't let it.
She understands that people that are stuck in the traffic he creates whenever he puts a spaceship in the middle of it are not going to care that they didn't die because they didn't die. They're going to care that they're late to work or that they can't pick their kids up from school or whatever. And she sees that coming, and he just doesn't care. He can't be bothered. Like, I just saved tens of thousands of lives. I've got something else to do. That's not my worry. And we've never really seen him deal with, especially like the social media, modern inconvenience, modern world in that way, where he can win the fight, he can be the biggest badass, and he can still kind of lose. Like, he can still be vilified in the press or, like have people against him simply because he's not thinking like that. So you have this other person that lives in his head who is telling him all the time, like, you can't do that. And I think that humanizes him in and of itself, like having to work within like creating a checks and balances sort of between those two characters. And she's always going to be right on some level. And he's always going to not care on some level, but them trying to find their way has been really fun.
Yeah, I think to add to that, like, one of the things that and again, this is a huge reason why I wanted to work with you on X-O, Dennis, is the levels of emotion that you bring, to all the characters. I feel like a lot of times we see these superhero stories where everyone is one note, one emotion all the time. Either I'm always angry or I'm always silly or, whatever. And like, we see Eric be frustrated and we see him get angry and we see him be confused and, all within a span of like 4 or 5 pages, which is, again, so relatable, very, very human. And I think is what makes this run stand out in so many different ways.
Yeah, I feel like the situation he's in, the situation he's been in for years. I mean, he got yanked through time, but also put on a spaceship and made a prisoner, and then his hands removed. Like, all of this awful stuff has happened to him, and he's just trying to be like the best version of himself and trying to do what's best for everyone around him all the time. If you think about it, like, the stress of that would be ungodly. Like, what that would do to your mind and your emotions all the time. So it's fun to be able to really lean into that. While also giving, 10, 12 pages of just him destroying things every issue so that it's still X-O.
We do love the 10 to 12 pages of destroying things. I'm not going to lie.
It's necessary.
Yeah. I think maybe this question is geared more towards Heather, but I'm really interested in the genre approach that Valiant has taken, especially recently with the return of their flagship characters. And X-O feels like the superhero right now at Valiant. What we've seen so far, it feels like a very superhero approach. I wanted to see kind of how much into that direction came from you, Heather, and was it something that was the result of a more natural process, or was this kind of putting this flagship character on a superhero pedestal and exploring that view of him?
I think, it just felt kind of organic to me, if you do look at the projects I work on, they are all very genre focused, especially, the things that I'm working on right now at Valiant. But with X-O, when I came onto the project, it was all about looking at his vast history, where he has been, and where there's room to grow, and what seemed like the natural progression of that. And to me, the natural progression of him battling all these aliens out in space did feel like, okay, it's time to come home and be the hero that everyone says you are, but we haven't really seen, we haven't really seen an extensive amount of time of X-O being the world's greatest superhero. And so it felt time to really explore that and what that means, not only for the Valiant universe, but also for Eric, for Shannara, for the civilians, for the rest of the heroes. And it's been a lot of fun getting to do that, and see, Eric can deal with aliens all day long. He knows what to do. He can, he won't bat an eye. But to see him try and deal with fixing a broken car, he can't just punch it. He can't just smash it. There's nuance to, communicating with a mom at a basketball court that it does not compute. And, it's a lot of fun getting to visit those scenarios.
Absolutely. And if I can follow up with Dennis, in how that conversation happens within the book itself, we see that relationship between Eric and Shannara. And I've gotten the feeling that what we see with Shannara is that weight of responsibility of being a superhero, reminding them there are people stuck in traffic, or to say you're welcome when someone says thank you. And I think that's a really interesting nod. And there's a bit of a meta commentary, I feel like, with the history of superheroes even, and what that meant. I wanted to see, is that something that you're purposely playing into to kind of build up this picture of Eric as a superhero in the Valiant universe?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the most interesting thing about superheroes, is that they've got powers that we could never imagine, but they live in the same world we do. So what would it be like carrying the weight of that responsibility? And the beauty of Shannara, she's a person, but she also has access to every bit of human and alien knowledge that ever existed at all times. So she fully understands what happens on Twitter, for instance, when there's bombing somewhere. She understands what happens when people are overwhelmed or inconvenienced, or she can moment to moment tell how people feel about him based on what's going on the internet. And then she filters that through, her own thoughts and feelings. And he not only, to him, science is sort of magic. He got torn through time and brought, immediately to an alien spaceship where nothing makes sense in the same way it does to us. And so she brings that perspective that she's trying But to him, it's just like you win the war. Like you beat the bad guy, you save the people. That's what you've got to do. And yeah, I don't know. Their relationship was one of the most fun things I've ever written because they're so different. But at this point, like I get them after they're so used to each other. Like this isn't new. They've been having these arguments forever. We just started leaning into it. And it's an important part of his life now because he's not fighting a war. He's not stopping an alien invasion. He's like trying to save New York. He's like trying to help people. And so whether or not those people hate him or think he's a creep or whatever, like that's important to the job now. And so it is really fun to play with those two characters.
Yeah, and that play into their dynamic. Was that something that was like going into it? You're like, okay, we really want to show Shanhara in a way that it hasn't been, or was it just something that kind of developed as you decided, what plots you wanted to go with, or just started developing the story? Because it is very humanized, and like her own character in a way we haven't seen in any other previous run.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the one thing I told Dennis, going into this was, the two things. One, we wanted him on Earth. And then two, it was, what makes X-O and Arik different from a Conan meets, a Superman or a Thor or whatever. And it is Shanhara. Like Shanhara is what makes X-O such a unique and special character. And, he's ripped out of space and time, but so is she. And there's something really beautiful about the fact that really all they have in the world, in the universe, is each other. And trauma bonding or not, that is what it is, and no other run has ever explored that in any way. And I really wanted to explore that. And Dennis was up for it.
Yeah, that's all Heather. She asked for it. I'm really glad she did. It was a thing that probably I never would have come up with, but it is by far the most fun thing about writing the book. Like those two arguing. I love writing arguing. Like when I did Spider-Woman, it was mostly like Carol Danvers and Jessica Drew arguing the whole time. So this is similar, except these two characters couldn't trust each other more and couldn't have any different, like more different views on how to do things in the world and everything. So their dynamic is delightful.
It really is. I think that's something that, from what I've seen, a lot of fans, that's immediately, what the most discussed topic is of this series is that relationship and how we're going to see it continue. I can't help but notice, Dennis, you had mentioned that this is something that they had been doing for quite a long time, this argument back and forth. How much of that evolution are we going to see take place now, considering where they are and what's to come in the future?
Their relationship is definitely going to grow. We have a complication coming to their relationship, maybe more than one, that will
subtle. I love it.
But yeah, in my mind, like all of this has been growing in the background of all the previous runs. It's just we're giving you more of a peek inside of it. But yeah, that you'll definitely see these two weather some storms and their relationship grow even stronger and weirder.
Well, and speaking of relationships, one thing that makes the Valiant universe different from everything else is that it's always been heavily intertwined without, the books weighing each other down. With X-O having this new status not so much new status, but being focused on as him being like the Superman guy. Will we see going forward him interacting with some of the other Valiant characters and see how they kind of take to this new approach he's taken to superheroes, so to speak?
Well, my personal goal with the book is to chump Cullen Bunn's Shadow Man as much as possible and as often as possible, because Cullen is a monster and needs to be taken down. So I don't know what the company line is, but that's my intention going forward, is that X-O is going to make Shadow Man really foolish as often as possible.
I'm up for an X-O Shadow Man crossover. No, I mean, it's definitely something Dennis and I have discussed is how to bring X-O in with the new universe, or not the new universe, but the universe. But it's super important to right now establish X-O in his new status quo first. You know, you want to introduce readers and get them comfortable with this new status quo before, okay, now we're going to throw in Livewire and Harada and, you know, everything all at once, because that's a lot, right? And right now it's all about Eric and Shinhara and what their story is and what that means for the greater universe before we get into the greater universe.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's something that I actually really appreciate as a Valiant reader, that so many of these books you can jump into, you know, right now, and you don't need to read everything that X-O has done since the reboot in, you know, 2012. This is a series that you can jump into right now and enjoy X-O Manowar. But do you find it difficult? I mean, this can be for both of y'all to balance that need to bring the X-O that has really stood the test of time even since before the reboot and been a flagship character versus establishing this new status quo that, you know, can bring in new readers and be familiar and accessible as well.
I like to think, so one of my first ongoing series was a Cable book from the X-Men, and I think about writing characters that have a long history. You should write them how you write Cable, where it's impossible for you to use everything because it's a very rich history, but you want the character to have the scars and the weight of everything that's happened before. So you have to understand it, you have to know it, and then you just keep it in mind with how they would react to the things that are going on, so that you're not constantly writing stories about old stories. So that's definitely how I approached this. Like, X-O is a man that you can tell he's been through everything he's been through in the past, and it's not that we won't be using stuff from that, but a new reader isn't going to need to know that. They just need to understand this is the guy who's been through hell, and here's the Reader's Digest version of his past, and now we're going from this point forward. So that's how I approach it, at least in my own head.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very astute way of putting that. I think, you know, a lot of the nuance and final touches that Dennis and I will put on into every single issue is something that we call like a lettering pass, you know, and it's when it's when the letterer does a pass of the lettering. But, you know, we literally just did one for X-O3 this week. And, you know, we'll go back in, and that's where I will poke little notes at Dennis of like, oh, this is where we can thread some nuance in and refer to other things or reference, you know, whatever. And really make the world and that universe as well-rounded as we all know it to be.
Yeah, Heather's really good at that. She reminds me he was a prince, and she reminds me how to spell all the names. I do that wrong on every single script.
In the same issue, it'll be spelled 3 different ways.
Listen, a C and a K are interchangeable, and I stick by that.
Excellent. Good stuff. Well, and then going forward with that, as far as, you know, like you said, you want to focus now on establishing X-O. Is there...
This is Ken poking for spoilers.
I know, no. I know this face.
Yeah, we know that face too well.
Okay.
Just ask what you want to ask, and we'll tell you no.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, all right. Well, then I'm gonna go hard on this one. Okay. So we talked to Matt, and there was some references that the what did you say? It was reality is not absolute, right? X-O was a big part of the original Unity. Okay, this is totally beside. I'll get back to the other thing I was gonna ask, because I gotta ask this one. Okay, so is that a callback to maybe like the next big deal? Because if you look at the board, right, you got X-O back, Shadow Man's back. You brought all the flagship guys back, and then there's like these big references to the biggest crossover ever in the original run. So, is there anything you can tell us, maybe, possibly, about X-O in that element of the future?
Oh, I'm sure there's things that I could tell you. I won't.
And that's totally fair.
That's fair. That's totally fair. All right. Well, the other thing too, though, is with X-O and focusing on him now, as far as like the villains and whatnot, are you going to be more focused on introducing new threats like you have with the first couple issues, or will you be seeing some like familiar faces, or maybe a mix of both?
We're super focused on building this corner of the Valiant universe for X-O and getting weirder and crazier and bigger as it goes on, because we want it to feel really real, like really our Earth to begin with, but also we have an incredibly powerful hero who we've seen topple alien armadas. So it's important to be able to build those threats in a way that makes sense. So that was one of my main goals, or our main goals early on, is to organically and grassroots style build threats that will be really, really scary. So
Yeah.
a bunch of new stuff coming.
Yeah. Dennis and I, in particular, are taking a real deep dive into X-O's pantheon of villains.
Yes.
You like that?
That's it.
Definitely like that.
Definitely. I think it's just really exciting to see, like, especially you can always go back and read all the older stuff, and it's super exciting. But as a newer fan coming in, this is kind of what you want out of Valiant. This is an exciting genre-driven story that's really sci-fi. I love, Dennis, that you describe it as weird more than once. Because, like, I feel like the series is primed to go in a weird direction, and I'm really excited for that. Are there any influences or anything like that, outside of Valiant that you're bringing into it to kind of push it in this weird direction?
Yeah, probably. The question is, what are they? I've been watching a lot of West Wing lately. Does that count? Is that a weird thing?
I mean, it's a weird reference.
I have a tendency when I'm working on new things, or when I'm plotting especially, to go back to TV shows and books and comics that I've loved in the past, just to sort of remember, like, what was the thing that made me fall in love with that, which creates some weird bedfellows when it comes to my inspiration versus what actually makes it to the page. So I'm not joking when I say there will be West Wing influences in X-O going forward. You just won't be able to know they're there. But yeah, so my favorite TV shows will be inspiring this book a lot going forward.
So how much Matthew McConaughey did you watch going into this?
So much. I rewatched his scenes from Magic Mike 10, 12 times before the first time I watched it.
Magic Mike was the one, huh?
It's the one. It's the most
the nude scene when Shahara says maybe nudity was a little bit much. I'm getting it now.
Yes, it all makes sense now.
Well, honestly, I can't think of a better note to end on. But thank you guys for joining us, Heather. It's been great having you back. Dennis, whenever you want to come back, feel free.
Anytime. It's a blast.
It's been awesome talking to you guys. Is there anything going out that you guys want to name drop or anything like that?
I mean, X-O #2 is on sale very, very soon. I think November 25th is the date. And we just re-announced Shadow Man, Cullen Bunn, that monster, coming soon in 2021. Bleh. And then, yeah, if you haven't checked out our announcement for the Harbinger, definitely check that out, because that is some exciting big stuff. So, and also just every other Valiant book, because they're great.
Yep.
The
only other thing I have coming out, other than X-O #2, which you should definitely grab, is my image book, Sea of Stars, is back out and happening now. I co-write that with Jason Aaron, and it is equally inspired by the West Wing.
There you go. Time to update the All right. Well, until next time, thanks for joining us, guys. As you watching, stay valiant, support local comic shops, and go vote.
Yes, indeed.